Welcome to Spring LIB.
All right, so for this question, I think it's useful to visualize what's happening in an oil spill in order to figure out like all of the effects, because this is another question that's really focused on the broad picture of what's happening at like every level and getting the most detailed and correct answer possible, even if there are other, options that are technically true but don't give the full picture, is what we're going for in a question like this. So first of all, this let's say this is an ocean, and this like might be by, you know, the shoreline on this side. Um, so we've got like a little turtle over here. This is like a fish hanging out. And the oil spill has kind of like happened right, it's on this shoreline right here. Um, it's spreading out into the water. And while this is happening, the first thing we can think about is that this is a layer on the surface of the water that is blocking sunlight. So as it's doing that, there are phytoplankton, there are plants and seaweed and things under the surface of the soil spill that use photosynthesis, use light energy from the sun to make chemical energy that they use to not only feed themselves, but that everything, like all other organisms in the ocean, rely on these things, rely on this chemical energy in order to survive. So we take the sun out of the equation, and that's really detrimental for everything, under it. At the same time, the oil itself doesn't just block sunlight, it also affects the organisms it comes in contact with directly. Like it think about properties of oil, especially properties of oil in water. They don't mix. Spoiler. Um, Fish, like this fish got some oil on it, and now its fins are kind of stuck, and it's difficult to move as fast as it did before, which can make getting food difficult or maybe escaping the oil spill difficult. This can have an effect on like the water quality itself, and maybe there are toxic components that are dangerous for the organisms living in the water to ingest or to breathe in through their gills or other forms of, contact, etc. And even, organisms living on the land that are affected by the oil can also have decreased mobility or can be negatively affected by compounds in it that they are not tolerable of. So now that we have visualized this picture of like everything that's going on, we can take a look at our answer choices and see which ones combine, the most correct options with the most sort of the fullest picture. Uh, Option A uh, actually says that oil spills increase the amount of light and oxygen, which would limit which would, like photoplanktons would perish, and excuse me, excuse me, and this would also like harm marine animals in terms of mobility and maybe fatal for them. Um, the whole latter half sounds true, but first of all, let's think about how would an oil spill lead to an increase in light and oxygen in a body of water. Remember, oil and water don't exactly mix, so it's really forming more of like a layer in the water that's blocking light. I'm sure you've seen oil, or you at least know of it. It's not really transparent enough to increase the amount of light already coming into the ocean. And also at that point, it doesn't really explain why phytoplankton would die from that. Uh, Option B tells us that it's the same thing, increase the amount of light and oxygen. The phytoplanktons may increase because of that. That could be true from an increase in light, which oil spills don't do. Um, Actually, this whole, option basically says oil spills are a good thing. Um, But I think we know from our reading of the textbook that that is very false, and also from just being able to visualize oil spills themselves. Um, Option C says they cover the surface of the ocean, reducing the amount of light. So there we go. Um, but this option says that marine organisms that don't survive, like that aren't, photosynthesizers, uh, and can survive without light, won't be affected. But let's think about that for a moment. Like this turtle out here, there are organisms who do live, independent of light itself. They'll still need, photosynthesizers to give them that energy, but they're not, directly dependent on it for food. But oil can still affect their mobility and can be toxic to them. So I don't think it's safe to say that they'll be fine. Um, Option D, however, gives the full gamut of everything. We got reduced light and oxygen, death of phytoplankton, we have limited mobility of marine animals, and potential death. And then we also have the cleanup options, which are chemicals and bioremediation, which are ways of like eating away at the oil spill, using chemicals or organisms themselves that can consume it. So I would say that based off of all that we know about oil and oil spills from our textbook and from our just basic visualization processes, D is our best